Well, both Hillary and Hans are here. They are our sponsors, but we wanted them also to let us know about the great work they're trying to do to set up a clinical trial, this time with a pharma product, a drug actually, not a nutraceutical, this time for gain of function, for kids with gain of function. I know that your trial will start probably, hopefully, if when we get it going, it would start on GRIN 2B, but I know that you're going to talk more about that. So with no further ado, I'll let you take over. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a moment here to pull up our slides. And perfect. Okay, so thank you, Sandra, so much, and to all of GRIN 2B Europe for the invitation today. We are so grateful to be here to have the opportunity to speak with all of you. And we're just eager to share absolutely as much as we can today with all of you. So we can start with some introductions. As Sandra said, I am Hillary Savoie. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Communications at GRIN Therapeutics. And I come to this role with a background as an advocate and a mom of an ultra rare child myself. I've spent the last 8 years working on founding and directing an organization called the Cute Syndrome Foundation, which focused on SCN8A epilepsy. And in that time, spent a good deal of energy working with sponsors in that space and thinking a lot about how what we know as advocates and parents is so important for the drug development process. And I joined GRIN Therapeutics in September to kind of help work with the company to ensure that what we know within the GRIN community can be applied to what we're doing as a company. And I'm so happy to be here and working with Hans, who I'll let provide a little bit of background on who he is and what he does.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everybody, for having us here. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. Wish you a good afternoon and wish we were there with you in person, but maybe next year. My name is Hans Christinger, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for GRIN Therapeutics. I'm based in New York area. We also have a team in Brussels, which we'll tell you about in a second. But you know, I also have another hat where I'm on the board of the KIF1A Foundation, and you know, it's another similar syndrome with similar challenges, and we spend a lot of our time trying to figure out how do we take the good science that's happening out there in neuroscience and apply it to the community. Huge unmet needs, and how do we organize resources to bring a care or a cure in a time frame that matters. So that's another hat that I have in this journey. I started at GRIN in August, so about the same time as Hillary, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be working with her. I come from a company called Ovid Therapeutics, where we spent a lot of time in Dravet and LGS. Takeda is taking that program forward into pivotal studies as we speak. And we also did a lot of work in Angelman and Fragile X, a couple of other syndromes. So I spent a lot of time trying to build out science-driven, patient-centered companies. And most of the experience that I have leading to these opportunities comes from working in larger companies, Roche and Abbott as a couple of examples, and started out in the 90s on the science side, doing X-ray crystallography, looked at the structure of vascular endothelial growth factor and things like that. But that's a quick bit of my background. And I don't know, do we go to the next slide on the team?
Yeah, here we are.
Because I think, you know, it's GRIN Therapeutics is a relatively new company. It's one you may not have heard a lot about yet. And like Hillary said, we really are grateful to be able to share with you our journey, because it is very important that we're transparent with you and you understand the kind of things that are important as we do things in moving towards the clinic, so that we do things that are meaningful. But I also want you to know that we've got a very good team behind us. So there are a couple of things. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, and I think this is the best and brightest and most fun team that I've had the opportunity to work with. So it's humbling, and I'm really grateful to be able to have my name up here with this team. And without going into too much detail, there you see a number of MDs and PhDs up there. So really just a smart group of people, a passionate group of people. Pierre-Andrea Muglia, you may have met before, really is the founder of this company and the driver for this company. As the scientific understanding of GRIN 2B and GRIN disorders was coming to a better place of understanding, he saw the opportunity for the science that we'll talk about in a second. And it's his dedication and passion that really brought this all to fruition and brought this team together. And the other thing, this team, when you look at the names up here, they've just had an unbelievable track record of success for over decades, doing the types of things that we're setting out to do. And you'll also see the reference to Blackstone. So, well-resourced organization as well. So I think those are the key points for this slide.
So, as Hans said, we have this amazing team that's working on this extraordinary project, and we really wanted to be here today to share some of that knowledge with all of you, to essentially provide, our goals today are to provide updates on our program status, to give you also just some general background as a community on clinical trials, how they work and how they work a little bit differently in rare diseases, and share the efforts that are underway with our team, and really share with you the efforts that you have fed, because we have been learning from your community since the beginning, from your advocates, from your caregivers, and we really wanted to be able to share back with you some of the results of that. And to open a transparent dialogue, Hans and I and the whole team are really dedicated to the notion that this is a back and forth. We should be sharing information, we should be engaged in conversation, and we want to make sure that we keep the bar low for that. Hans, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that, as we walk through the slides, we're getting ready for the first trial, and you'll see the reason I said first trial. First site could be up and running this summer, and the rest will be coming in the fall. And so we really want to share where we are, the types of things that we're thinking through, and the types of things that we have to work through in bringing a potential medicine through to make sure it's safe, and we've got the right, looking at the right measurements to show that it actually works. So it's about that transparency that Hillary mentioned. And I think there are kind of two themes that you'll see as we talk through today. One is really just making sure that we are thinking about what to measure in the right way that's relevant and specific for you, and that we're not just applying something that we've tried somewhere else and making sure it works. So that's one key point. And then the other is, as we are starting this first trial, it's not a huge trial. We want to do it quickly, and that means it's important to also pick the right sites. So those are a couple of things that you'll see us talk through, but I'll pass it back, Hillary. I can talk forever. So
this is essentially, Hans, and my favorite topic. So we always are happy to be sharing these these pieces of information with all of you. We spend a lot of time having these conversations. So Hans, yeah, I think maybe we can dive into a little bit of background on Radipradil.
Okay. So in the next slide, I think we'll have a video about clinical trials. And, our first trial, well, Radipradil, first of all, thanks to Dr. Ramsey, I think we don't need to go into a lot of the science. You've got a gene called GRIN 2B, which ultimately results in NR2B, a protein called NR2B that is responsible for the excitatory pathway in the brain. And, we're looking at a variant in that protein that causes something that we want to modulate. So in the case of gain of function, we have an overactive NMDA receptor. We have an overactive GRIN2B. GRIN2B is part of that NMDA receptor, as we talked about in the last discussion. And so radipridil is highly selective. It binds to that portion of the NMDA. So the GRIN2 piece, which is encoded by the NR2B piece, which is encoded by GRIN2B. And so our small molecule binds specifically to that subunit, to that protein, and it dampens the expression. So we hope to modulate and normalize the activity of that receptor. That's what the molecule is designed to do. And we come at it with, actually, it's been tested for safety, however, in adults. It's been tested in infants for infantile spasm, so 3 infants, it was used safely there. So there's a reasonable track record that we're building from, that we understand. And we've also done a good number of preclinical models. You saw some of those examples in the last presentation, where we've shown anti-seizure effects in those models. And we've shown that we've been able to do what we hypothesized, which what I started with, normalizing gain of function in some preclinical models. And so, we hope that by doing this, we can demonstrate that we've got a safe and effective molecule, that we know where, when, and how to use it. So that's a little bit of background about radipridil.
And I think what's important, and it's wonderful to have had Dr. Ramsey speak ahead of us, because I think what's really important here is to understand that we're not going as far back to the source of the problem as what Dr. Ramsey was talking about, but by acting directly on that subunit that's encoded by GRIN2B, we really hope that going right to the source of the problem may have an effect on a host of symptoms that stem from that initial problem. I think, though, if we can take a step back now that we've introduced our team and kind of given a sense of what radipridil is and what it does, we recognize that as a community, you haven't had a ton of experience with clinical trials, and certainly L-serine is the exception there. But we wanted to share with you a video that we've developed that just kind of walks through how clinical trials work and why the way that they work is a little bit different in a community like the GRIN disorders. So hopefully in the next slide, I can make this play. I feel like video is always a little touch and go, but let's see if this works. Oh, you can still see, eh? Let's try.
Clinical trials play an important role in the development of new treatments. They allow scientists to determine if a new approach is safe, effective, and offers better results than existing therapies. Typically, clinical trials are made up of 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3. Treatments move from one phase to the next if they're successful. In each subsequent phase, the number of patients involved gets larger, and the study design is modified in order to help answer different questions about safety, efficacy, and any side effects. For very rare conditions, clinical trials can be different, involving fewer patients, allowing for the combination of trial phases requiring close collaboration with the caregiver community. Every trial involves inclusion and exclusion criteria, specific requirements to be allowed into a trial. These can include age as well as disease characteristics. The purpose is to ensure that the results obtained are as valid as possible. While a trial may help your child, they are also conducted for the benefit of the wider community. We are pleased to be working in collaboration with key leaders from the GRIN community. And while the path to clinical trials is complex, we see you as the most important partners in the journey towards the first clinical trials for GRIN2B related disorders.
Okay, let's see if I can get back into presentation mode. Sorry about that. The video kicked us out here. Oh. Well, I think we might be stuck in this way. Let's see. Let me try one more time. There we go. Okay. So I think, Hans, if you want to talk a little bit about how our primary objectives kind of fit into what we just saw in that video.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. So again, this is the first trial, and what we hope to do is build on the experience that we have with this molecule and show that it is safe and tolerable in GRIN 2B patients. That's primary objective number one. And we know a lot about which dose range to start, and we've got a good theory and a good model for how to administer the medicine, the potential medicine. And so we also want to use that to validate or confirm our hypothesis, our thinking from our previous experience. So there's a dosing strategy within the first trial as well. And in this, we will see the range of where we actually want to be safe and tolerable. So there is a very well thought through process to slowly find the right dose. So it's safe and using best practices to make sure that we're doing that well. And while we're doing that, you can also look for secondary endpoints or secondary objectives, which is to see, are you in this process also seeing that you've got a difference in seizure burden or behavioral symptoms or other things that are important for you. And so in a way, you're combining the first two trials of what we saw in a normal clinical trial setting. And this is where I think it's really important to make sure that there's an open dialogue about the types of things that we're measuring. Seizures are things that regulators and clinicians are used to measuring. And then there are behavioral symptoms that there are certain scales and measurements, but it's really important to measure things that are relevant for you and not just things that are relevant for other communities. So maybe I'll pause there and see, Hillary, is that, did I cover it, or you have?
Yeah.
Please add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the important pieces with the primary objectives that we're looking at is that while Radiperdil has been in patient populations, including infants, this is the first time that we would be administering Radiperdil to a GRIN 2B population. And so we really want to be certain that our dosing strategy makes sense. So we are looking at a very personalized, individualized process for dosing each patient that would be in the trial. And this means perhaps some extra steps, but we really want to be sure that we understand how Radiperdil is working in all of the patients that enroll. And I think, again, just we have sort of early positive feedback from regulators that encourage us to move forward in this way where we're looking not only at safety, but also at efficacy, right? Looking to see whether we can start to understand how Radiperdil could impact, as Hans said, seizure burden, behavioral symptoms, and other symptoms that are associated with GRIN 2B. So I think this is important we saw in the video that every trial has inclusion and exclusion criteria, and they help us understand better how a particular treatment works by defining the patient population very carefully. So we wanted to take the step to share with you some of the inclusion criteria that we're considering for this trial, so that you have an understanding of the population that we're looking at. So we have kind of three categories that we're sharing today. There's the age-based category, so looking at 6 months to 12 years of age. A genetic profile, that's a confirmed GRIN 2B genetic variant, as well as that particular variant being a confirmed gain of function because of the way the mechanism of action works in Radiperdil. And then a clinical profile, and this is the part I really wanted to highlight for this conversation today, is that we are looking at, as Hans said, it's a small study to start. It's a small group of people for the first study. but we are not only looking at individuals with seizures. So we have a subgroup of the population that will need to have at least one observable seizure per week. And then as a result of what we learned from you as a community, we are also looking at enrolling children who have only, meaning no seizures, but significant behavioral symptoms, so that we can explore the effect of verdiperidil on those behavioral symptoms.
And, you know, what we learned from this, with this trial will set us up for the next trial, which we hope to roll into rather quickly. So that next trial should be confirming what we learned here. We should make sure that we've refined the types of measurements and things like that, so that we're continuing to build on it, build through success. And then we've got the possibility also to go broader where it makes sense, where it's scientifically, there's a scientific rationale. We've generated data to go beyond GRIN 2B, for example, and beyond 12 years old as well. So, you know, again, it's a first trial, and we're already thinking through what that next trial would look like. But what we're trying to do is be very clear about the types of things we're thinking about today, so that we can start to set our baseline and look at what we're measuring and continue to build for success.
And I think it's very important that we share with you the places that where our minds are going for next steps, so that you can be prepared as a community. And, you know, we don't want to raise expectations, but we also want to be sure that you all understand what we're thinking about. And the behavioral piece, I think, Hans, it's important to explain how much the stories of you know, families in your community who've been willing to share their stories with us have affected the way that we think about this first trial. And the stories of some of the behavioral challenges that you all face have really resonated with our team and are very much a part of our regular conversations as we make plans.
Absolutely.
So Hans, maybe you can speak a little bit about the complexity here that this graphic is trying to explain, about actually getting to the point of knowing whether or not we have a confirmed gain of function.
Yeah, and I always like to start with simplicity rather than complexity. You know, we recognize on the last slide that there's the known GRIN 2B variant that's important, but then there's also known characterization of that gain of function, and it isn't clear to me how well known that characterization is. So we put this slide in to say, look, we're here to try to make sure that we're increasing the knowledge, the scientific awareness, as well as trying to help move this potential medicine through. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we make sure that there's a good understanding and characterization of, you know, what is GRIN 2B, what is gain of function, and you know, how can we invest to make sure that that's pretty well known. And so we do have a system with a number of very, you know, leading academicians. I'm sure everybody has in the community knows each other, but you know, you start with a gain of function, a known GRIN 2B variant list, usually in the public domain, and we've got a network of folks who are conducting further analyses to characterize the variants, to identify, are they gain of function, are they loss of function. Further, if it's not known, do we believe that there's a potential benefit by applying verdiperidil? What do we know from in vitro tests or non-human testing that says, if we don't know if it's gain of function, will it make sense to, or is it a problem to enroll a person? But you know, this is actually really all about trying to be helpful in understanding the characterization of gain of function, loss of function complex. And so we do have a system, and we've got at the bottom of this, you know, just what is known today. So what are our assumptions as we go into this, and you know, what can we do to contribute to the general scientific understanding of what does it mean to have a gain of function or loss of function.
And I think one of the important pieces here for families to understand is that, first of all, when you're entering your data into various research databases, registries, when you are seen at your clinical site, these are all opportunities for your particular variants to have been shared, not in a de-identified manner, but with researchers in the space in order to know that this is a variant that needs to be analyzed. And I think it's also important to note that although we're looking for gain of function variants for enrollment in this particular trial, it's our hope is to help advance knowledge on all of the variants in this space and improve access to understanding and scientific knowledge in the space. And we really want to be good community members in helping in whatever way we can to improve the quality of knowledge in this space.
And I think I saw a question pop up about gain of function animal models. And I would say that today there is not a validated gain of function animal model. There are a number of, we're building on about at least 10 years of testing in a number of different kind of models that test this pathway and how it works. We are in close contact and collaboration with a number of people who are establishing gain of function animal models for GRIN 2B, but that is one that it's still being developed, is probably the short answer. But, and Hillary, any comment on that?
No, I think, I guess the only other piece I would say, coming back to the characterization, is just that, we are supporting efforts to ensure that all of the knowledge that's attained through this process is absolutely in the public domain. So this is not something that that we're pursuing for just for us, right? We're trying to make sure that whatever is learned about GRIN disorders and GRIN 2B in particular is shared in the public domain and improves the quality of research understanding, clinical understanding, and frankly, day-to-day life understanding of your community and your children.
Yeah, absolutely. The agreements call for this to be published and published immediately. So there's nothing proprietary in this setup. Yeah.
So I think we can move on and talk a little bit about sites. Hans, maybe you can give a little bit of flavor for how we think about sites as we are having conversations as a company.
Sure. Yeah. So, again, this is the first trial, and it should lead to an expanded trial. And hopefully that next trial starts next year, depending on how quickly we can get it set up and running. But you have to start somewhere. And so the first trial is not going to be very large. We've got sites in the US and Europe as a start. And we start to think about how can we quickly look at hospitals and clinics that have the necessary capabilities. They have the right interest and motivation, and you also can put those in places where you can go quickly. They're easy access for families, right? And so it's always a difficult selection. You can't in the first trial go everywhere. That would be very expensive. It would impact the quality of the data potentially. So you kind of have to start with this tip of the spear with what are the short list handful of countries and sites where you start that will enable you to then go to a next trial and add more. But we look at who are the key physicians that we're working with. Are they and their staff and facilities certified and able to implement and in a time frame that is appropriate? And then how does that match with ease of access for families? So those are some of the things that we try to be very transparent. These aren't answers. This is our current thinking. And if there's something else we should think about, we'll certainly take it under under advisement. And then there's always a question of now versus tomorrow. So generating the data to be able to go into the next trial is kind of the thinking, but maybe I'll stop there, Hillary.
Yeah, I think it's important for families to know. So what you see here on this map is the GRIN 2B Foundation, their heat map. So all of those red dots are all of you who decided to put your information into that GRIN 2B Foundation map. So we used it just as an example that, you know, there's no reason that the distribution of patients isn't entirely even, but we only can go where we know that they're patients. And so I think as a sort of putting my mother hat and my advocate hat on for a moment, this is one of the ways that I think all of you as parents, if you're interested in clinical trials, if you're interested in you know, understanding what the state of the art for treatments is, one of the ways that you can best position yourself is to make sure that your advocacy organizations you're well connected with them, so they know who you are and where you are, so that you're well connected with your clinicians and they understand what your current thinking is on these on potential new treatments. And then it certainly helps anyone in the space who might be considering trials, either ourselves or, you know, down the line for subsequent trials, to place sites in intelligent ways so that they are convenient to you and meet all of your needs as a community. So I think that's really kind of one of the things that I hoped we could share with you today. And as Hans said, this is our current thinking. Some of this is a moving target, both for the first trial, but then certainly for subsequent trials as we cite further sites. Hans, do you have anything else to add to this picture?
No. You know, I would just make a general comment that, you know, if there's follow-up questions, we're going through a lot pretty quickly, but, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to Hillary at any time, right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're always eager to hear from you and have, I think it's something that when I worked in the SCNA space, I always said to our families, I think as parents, we underestimate how important our input is sometimes. And I just really want to drive home that every single one of your stories, every single interaction that we've had with advocates and caregivers in this space has been incredibly meaningful at all levels of our team. So I really want to drive that home. So to that end, I think we can just give a little bit of a color for what's next, what our next steps look like. We're in the process of dealing with various governing regulatory bodies to get all of the authorization to proceed with the clinical trial. We're working diligently with all of our partners who actually create the drug product and then ship it and make sure it is at all of the sites in time for the trial. And we are working very closely with site physicians and nurses and staff to make sure that they understand the requirements of the trial, that they provide feedback, and that they are in touch with, you know, potential patients. And then I think the part that is very close to Hans and my heart, certainly, and is important to highlight here today, is planning a really family-friendly study experience. So we have concierge services that will help with travel arrangements and making sure that our patient documents are as helpful as they possibly can be, and setting up home nursing services to help with trial involvement. And all of that, all of those are places where we're also seeking feedback from advocates in the space to make sure that the documents make sense, that they work for you, that the services that we're putting in place are what you will need as a community. Hans, do you have any other color to add to that?
No, I would just say, look, we recognize that there are certain rigid things that we need to do in order to satisfy the scientific rigor, to satisfy the regulatory authorities. And sometimes those aren't the most fun for those going through the process. So, you know, part of trying to be very communicative is so that we really hope that not only are we able to demonstrate that this is a potentially good medicine, we want to continue to build on the science and make sure that no matter what, we're moving the understanding forward. And two, we just, and the other point is we just really want to make sure that, we understand that not all of this is easy or fun, but if we do it together, we can make it a really worthwhile experience. So, where we say family friendly, it sounds funny with a clinical trial, but we really are trying to make sure that it's as convenient as possible, that, if there's a burden, we do everything we can to share that and make it as easy as possible to go through it. So leave it at that.
Absolutely. And with that, I think I know we're a little pressed for time, so I think we can move our questions over to the roundtable. If that's Sandra, is that the best?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think Gillian.
Perfect.
Yes, Hans and Hilary, thank you very much. First of all, of course, for sponsoring us and making this whole conference possible. And secondly, for this very important presentation. I know, of course, for the Love Kids, there is the L Serene, but for GAIN, there wasn't that much, just the Mayman team that didn't always work so well. So I think parents are very happy and very excited about this possibility with Radical Deals. So thank you very much about informing us about it and also giving more insight in how the trial will be and has to be set up.